Yeah. Um, well, we have the full story now, Ben. The full story is that I think the season had caught up with us. Um, we can now look back and say we peaked in the final. Um, there have been some very, very good things go on throughout the year that I think we're all going to look back on and be very proud of. But there is no two ways about it. That's painful. It was a bitterly disappointing way to go out of the playoffs. There were many, many facets of our game that were not close to the standards or levels that we've achieved and attained here, for sure. And I think it will leave a very bitter taste in our mouths as we go into the off-season. Sadly, 12 games beyond what was an exceptional final against Miami here, but that seems like it was a lifetime ago, and certainly feels maybe 2 lifetimes ago after being bounced out today. Well, I think it'll take a little bit more than maybe just a post-game analysis of where we were at. There was some, if I remember rightly, there was some difficulties coming out of Leagues Cup. I know Walker has been carrying a serious Achilles problem pretty much all year. He's had multiple, courses of treatment and injections to try and keep him going, and he's been a warrior. I think there'd have been an awful lot of players that we wouldn't have seen anywhere near as much as him. But it's certainly, in that opening exchange after Leagues Cup, hindered some of those performances. We were without him for 3 games before the international break. We only have to look at our output in front of goal. Our talisman and individual who's really dragged this team along in terms of goals for a long, long time has not been anywhere near as effective. I don't know the reason for that. We'd have to go back even further than that, probably, to maybe even conversations about Qatar. And that, it sends people off kilt a little bit. Mentally, even though there's been a lot of drive and energy and no 2 ways about it, still fully committed to what's going on. But you take a dip in form as an attacking player and it's very difficult to get back into gear. And I think that's been the case. I think we've seen some really bright spots out of Sam, but with a knee injury coming on the back of the Atlanta game, a lack of time and work with Hanny and any of the other forwards, I think it's seen a lot of inconsistencies there in connections and what we've achieved in that final third, and nobody else has been able to chip in. We've had the odd moment, but nowhere near consistent enough. But for some very stout defending, which has kept us in games. But even to that point, in the last 3 games now against this group, they've managed to squeeze a goal somehow, some way, and that's been enough. And that really shouldn't be the case, should it? We missed our chance, an opportunity, I think, in Orlando, where 2 or 3 great chances that were not converted to give us maybe a better outcome. And tonight, obviously, in front of goal was nowhere near what we needed. Yeah.
We talked about players kind of responding to what the referee is opposition and controlling what they can control. Were you happy with the reaction of the players, especially that first half, where it wasn't happening around them?
I thought it was an absolutely chaotic 20-25 minutes. it sounds like sour grapes all the time when you get beat, but there are some things that go on in their group that I just wouldn't condone. It's difficult to be critical of any team when they beat you, but that's maybe the only thing I can say about their team. It was a barrage of feigning injury. Their bench, at one point, I thought I saw 8 people on the field. I didn't even know they had 8 people on their bench. I don't know where they were coming from. It was a mess, an absolute mess. But, we were part of that. We conceded after 5 minutes. It gave them all the incentive that they needed to act and conduct themselves in that way. And they'll be delighted with the fact that they've won the game. And I guess, when we're looking at a professional game, and, there'll be plenty of teams that we've seen in the past that manage games that way and they frustrate their opponent. I think it put us out of our stride for that period. I actually thought we finished the half on a fairly decent note. There was a 15 or 20 minute window where the guys gathered themselves and the game seemed to settle into something that resembled a football match for the last 15 or 20 minutes. And there were some reasonable moments, clear-cut chances, but certainly a mindset and a positivity about the group that I felt coming into the break, there was something to build on. Unfortunately, the second half did not reach anywhere near the sort of heights or sort of quality that any of us would have liked, and in the end, it became almost an anxious, where and how can we get the next cross in to try and create something, and I think that comes out of a prolonged period of not scoring goals, of not finding the answer to an equation that's set, and in the end, a lack of confidence. And I think that's what we saw, a team that had plenty of fight and energy, and we're never going to give up the ghost with just one goal to find. But looking at what was needed, we just couldn't come up with a solution. The message was a very similar one to how I started this press conference. There have been some really high points of this season, but that certainly wasn't one of them. And we will all be bitterly disappointed when we wake up in the morning that we've bounced out of the playoffs in such a fashion. We are better than that. I know we are. The guys know they are. I don't think they've given the fans or anyone else a true reflection of what we're capable of here tonight or in the 2 games. And I think that will sit heavy going into the post-season or the off-season. A number of things to reflect on. I didn't go into this part of the conversation with the guys, but for me, a number of things to reflect on in the way that, probably 10 out of the last 12 games have ended up. There's been some good performances without goals. There's been some below par performances without goals. And ultimately, our form and a trend that has been part of our play in really the last 6 or 8 games has really been our downfall tonight. I would agree. I would totally agree. How much of that frustration can be handled better by the team? It is a good question, yeah. And the second one would be, do you feel this time, that those games, last part of the season, Yeah, I think that's always a challenge, Claudio, when you have got a salary cap. Guys that are going to be real difference makers, and of course, we're without Randall, um, an individual who in the past has made a big impact on the side, and I think gives a slightly different look and dimension to the group anyway. Um, so I think you're always looking for extra players that are going to be able to make a difference when you go behind. I think there's a little bit more to it than that though. We've had good sides out on the field. We've had good players on the field. Um, there have been moments. If we just take today again, let's just focus in on that for the moment. The start of the game's poor. We put ourselves behind the eight ball immediately. I think I said on more than one occasion, they've been able to squeeze a goal out of the game and do well enough and defend well enough to for that to be the difference. Last three games have been 1-0, all in their favour. It changes the dynamic of what we're looking at. So we've certainly been part of our own demise tonight. As far as the antics and the refereeing and the officiating, look, it's easy for me to say from the line, but I was talking to the fourth official, just saying, look, this is not the first time that Alan or Tory have been around Orlando, and I think there's you get used to certain players and certain styles, and you like it, you don't like it. They're winning games, and that will be their response. They've had a good season. They're into the semi-finals. I think they're a better team, to your point, than the way they conduct themselves sometimes. Some of the players and the way they go about their business, again, would not be something that I condone. But I have to respect the fact that they've had a good season and they've got some good footballers in their side as well. That is a fact. I do think that I think simply to finish that off, I think there were some guys in our side, understandably, that were ramped up and passionate about this game to get ourselves back in this tie and to take it to a third game. And maybe some of that overflowed in our game and the responses, which probably didn't help in the way that first 20-25 minutes went. Yeah, look, there's conversations happening all the time, not just at the end of the season about players. I think this team have shown not as consistently since Leagues Cup for sure. If we're talking about the form of Leagues Cup, and we had a fantastic run here in the early part of the season, I think it was 7 wins, in that middle part of the season. I think we've shown that there's definitely quality and the ability to challenge in a far better way than we have done this year in the postseason. No two ways about it. I think the addition of Sam will prove to be a good addition. It might take a little bit longer. It will take a little bit longer. The season's over. So a good pre-season for Sam will I think, be helpful for him to settle in to the group. But in terms of off-season acquisitions or changes, it will certainly be a conversation that myself and Mike and the other guys sit down and continue to assess. I think right now, without a shadow of a doubt, the emotions for everyone will always be negative, disappointing, frustrating. And I think there's a chance that you end up maybe making comments or assessments or judgments on players or situations that are rash. So I think we all need to take a deep breath. Like I said, I certainly need to digest the last 10 league games and these 2 playoff games against Orlando. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? What more could I have done? What more could the players have done in preparation to have been ready for these 2 playoff games for sure? But I think there were some things that went on before we got to this point that may have had an impact on how this has turned out. Yeah. Do you know what losing the locker room is? Okay, go on. You give me your explanation of losing the locker room. You're not going to give me your explanation. What is your assessment of losing the locker room? Because I think that's something that the press and fans will throw around just sort of quite willy-nilly. Okay. Yeah. I would maybe go a little bit deeper than that. I would say that the coach has probably lost respect. The players have lost respect for the coach. I think you see that, and on those occasions you start to see teams that, they get beat far too easily. I don't think we've been beaten too easily tonight, do you? I think we've played better than we have done tonight. We've created more than we have done tonight. An easy answer would be absolutely not. There's no way that there's. I think over a good period of time here, there's a respectful foundation from the staff to the players, and that is reciprocal. We've got a fantastic group. It's not about losing anyone or anything other than a game. And what we need to be able to do as we start next year is, I think, consider what the team looks like in terms of how they play. I'm certainly open to try and, inspire the players in a slightly different way in terms of the outlook of the group. But I think Claudio or somebody had mentioned about additions, and there may well be 1 or 2 that we can try and add that always give a little bit more edge and life to the group. But they've got to be the right players. There's no point in just adding anyone. You've got to add players that are going to be impactful. Yeah, I get the feeling from some of the questions that are coming out here, and I'm sure, yeah. Well, I'd see no reason why I wouldn't be. Like I said, there have been some real highs in this season. We would all love to have finished this season off in a very different manner to the way that we have. I, of course, never really control that. Contracts are there, and for the most part, they'll be torn up and thrown away and dismissed in whatever way, shape or form the ownership group or anyone else who's in a far more powerful position than me, would decide. But I think for sure, my mind is firmly on what and how we can regroup, retool, and certainly refocus. And the time and, for the players will be just as beneficial as it will be for the staff. In the end, I think the season has been a longer one than any of us have seen before, and maybe too long. In the end, maybe it was, a bridge too far for us when you see the emotions and the amount of football that the guys have played and the intensity of Leagues Cup. Looking now at the end of the season and the way that we can assess what's gone on, maybe it was just too much for the group. You know, too many players that were just not able to recalibrate and show that sort of quality again towards the end of the season. That's a fact now. Is that sorry? I mean, 46 games, if you look at the majority of... I had this conversation with somebody in England, and they asked me the question about the differences between the two leagues, the challenges between the two leagues. And I said, the English League, in League One and up towards the Premier League, 46 games, league games. You got some cup games thrown in there as well, depending on how well you do. So that challenge of playing 46 league games throughout a season is tough. But there's nowhere near as much travel. We play 34 league games. But our season has been extended with success. So we played 7 more very challenging cup games against sides that I think extended the team far more than we have been in an awful lot of other games. So in answer to your question, in the way that we've finished the season, yes, I do. I think it has been too many games for a team not dissimilar to a lot of others, where probably 14 or 15 players are going to get the brunt of that work. And that's a lot of work, a lot of travel, and an awful lot to deal with for that group of players. So maybe the question is, you know, over the course of next season with Champions League, you know, is there more rotation that I need to look at in the group? Because for sure, it was too many games.